Hello, and thank you for joining our panel, A Week in the Life of a Trade Pub Author. My name is Stefanie, and I'll be the panel moderator today. I have several amazing panelists with me, so if you have any questions for them, please drop them in the chat and we will make sure to answer them. Now I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. First, we have Sunyi Dean. Sunyi is a biracial autistic writer of fantasy fiction currently living in North England with her kids. She signed with a literary agent in 2018 after nearly 200 rejections, and then went on submission twice before managing to land a publisher. Her debut, The Book Eaters, will be out in August of this year with Tor in the US and Harper Voyager in the UK. Sunyi, please share with us a little bit more about you.
It's great to be part of this panel. I've really enjoyed a lot of the online opportunities that was kind of a silver lining for COVID, and just the accessibility that they bring. I write fantasy fiction and I live in North of England, and I try to draw on the different places I've lived. So I use contemporary settings either in Britain or Hong Kong or America.
Great, thank you very much. Up next, I'd like to introduce you to our next panelist, Katie Edwards. Katie is the author of the urban fantasy series, The Tarot Sequence, and his third book, The Hourglass Throne, which was published in May 2022. He's got an amazing reader base that has really responded to the major tones in his story: queer identity, deep world building, found family, and a strong balance between humor and drama. Katie, can you please share a bit more with us about you?
Sure, absolutely. This is the first series I've ever written. It's hopefully going to be a 9-book series. It's already plotted out. Well on my way with the third novel coming out in May, and I'll be under contract for a few more after that still. So I've got plenty ahead of me. It's a series very much baked into traditional urban fantasy with a lot of queer identity, which is very important to me, as well as massive world building and a lot of found family elements. I really wanted to make this a series filled with a lot of humor and love, with action at the same time. So it's been the experience of a lifetime.
That's awesome. Thank you. And then next we have Paulette Kennedy. Originally from the Ozarks, Paulette Kennedy now lives with her family and their menagerie of rescue pets in a quiet suburb of Los Angeles. Her debut novel, Parting the Veil, is a suspenseful Gothic romance that launched in November 2021 from Lake Union Publishing. She is currently at work on her sophomore novel, The Witch of Tin Mountain, a Southern Gothic set in rural Northern Arkansas during the Great Depression, releasing this December. Her novels feature strong-willed feminist heroines up against incredible odds, LGBTQ+ representation in historical settings, and accessible modern language. In her free time, Paulette enjoys tending to her garden, knitting, and finding unique vintage treasures at thrift stores and flea markets. Paulette, please tell us more about you.
Thanks so much, Stefanie. It's such a pleasure to be here with WriteHive again. I'm enjoying the panels. I think the biggest thing with my work is it is historical fiction, but it's not dry, and it's really modern in language and in themes. And so I really try to combine history with themes that resonate with the modern reader. And I also have a lot of LGBTQ+ rep in my work. It's very important to me. And also themes of found family and themes of like their trauma and PTSD. There's mental health representation and neurodiverse representation in my work, because those are all things that are relevant to me as a writer as well. And so I really enjoy being a Gothic historical fiction writer, and I like to bring a lot of those different themes into my work.
That's great. Thank you so much, Paulette.
Thanks.
So panelists, we have come together to talk about a week in your life as a trade pub author. Why don't we go ahead and get to our questions? And also quick reminder to everyone watching, if you have any questions for our panelists, please definitely drop that in the chat. So for our first question today, We'd like you to walk us through a typical work week for you as an author. Is the bulk of your time set for writing and editing? What else do you handle that new writers may not expect? Why don't we start with you, Katie?
I think every author is going to have a different story here because every author writes differently. You know, are you a pantser or are you a planner? I'm a consummate planner. I plan everything in advance. So I don't even sit down in front of the computer until I actually forget an outline for the entire story until I actually have an outline for the scene ahead of me, almost paragraph to paragraph that I'm going to write. Um, so for me, like most modern writers, I have a day job. So finding time, whether it be at lunch, before the day, right after the day, is critical. Preserving that time, making sure I always have dedicated writing time is important. But the thing that surprises me the most about being a published writer is all these ideas I had of banging out stories in front of the computer. You've got to temper that with the realities of the business demands of being a published writer. This isn't the industry it was 10 or 20 years ago. Thank you. My nephew's bringing me a cord so my phone doesn't die on me. Could you plug it in, please? One of the things that, it used to be that when you were signed with a publishing house, you'd have these amazing departments of support between marketing and publicity and editing. And while you still get a lot of the editorial help when you work with smaller publishers like I do, I think a lot of those traditional resources that when growing up, I imagine that authors have a lot of that you do yourself. It's not unusual to set up your own beta readers, to set up your own sensitivity readers, even to freelance your own editing or copy editing sometimes. By far, the thing that takes up the most of my week, though, is social media. Every writer is different. Whatever you're comfortable with, whatever sort of outreach you have with your readers, whether it be social media or a website or a blog, there's something you really need to put your heart into. There's some way you need to put yourself out there to connect with people who are reading your story and are in your world and want to share that experience with you. For me, it's Twitter. And I've got to say, as toxic as Twitter could be sometimes, I think I've managed to curate a really kind and encouraging atmosphere, because I only follow my readers or other people who share interests similar to mine. My readers know they can reach out to me through Twitter, and it's for the most part been an incredibly kind and supportive place. But I put quite a bit of time into that. I really listen to what my readers say. It's changed my story, what I intended to write, the things I focus on. Can't imagine not having that experience, so I put a premium on it myself.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. All right, let's jump to Paulette. Same question.
Well, I'm a full-time writer, and it's kind of been one of those situations that came about by accident. I was a wedding photographer before the pandemic, and when the pandemic hit, I lost all my business. And so my husband and I decided at that point that he would support me to go 100% into writing. And I also homeschool our daughter, who is on the autism spectrum. And so that allowed me to have more time for both. And right now it's actually really timely because my mother in Missouri is undergoing cancer treatment. And so I moved back home to help care for her while she's undergoing treatment. So having that kind of flexibility with my writing career has been just astronomically helpful right now. And so right now, my schedule is completely different than it is when I'm at home in LA. So right now I get up at 4 a.m. I don't write on the weekends. Weekends are just for rest and family and for my own mental health. But on Mondays, I get up at 4 a.m. I set my alarm and I get up and I read for about the first half hour. That's kind of my warm up. And I find that reading the words of others is really inspirational and it gets me excited to write. So after I read, then I make my coffee and I sit down at my desk and I really try on a good day to get between 1,000 and 2,000 words in with whatever project I'm working on. If I'm drafting, that's my goal. If I'm editing, I try to get about 50 pages in. That's usually my goal. So right now I'm getting ready to go into copy edits for The Witch of Ten Mountains. So that will be what I'll be working on. I'm also drafting my next novel, which doesn't have a title yet. And so I'm working on that right now as I'm waiting for my editor to get copy edits back to me. And so it's kind of this give and take kind of process when you're a published author. There's always something to be working on, whether it's your current already under contract book or your next book that you're going to pitch. There's always kind of that cycle that you're going through. And so my mornings, I usually end my writing session around 7 o'clock. My mom's usually up by then. And so I usually make her breakfast. And then I'll usually either read ARCs or get on social media or help my daughter with her schoolwork for the rest of the day. I kind of juggle a lot of things. I mean, when you're a mom, you do that anyway. But I really try to at least get that time in the morning, just me and my computer when it's completely silent, because otherwise I feel like it's just kind of hanging over my head all day. And I have an anxiety disorder, so that really kind of makes things ramp up. But so that's like my weekday time. And Thursdays are kind of a special day because Thursdays are the day that I set aside just for all of my author admin work. So I'll get up and I'll address like all of the blog posts, like newsletters, anything that I need to do like that, outreach to bloggers or podcasters or reviewers. I am hiring a virtual assistant prior to the launch of my next book, because during my debut year, I kind of saw the limit of my abilities with everything else that I do. And I am very privileged to be a full-time writer, and I realize that. But at the same time, like everything, you always find ways to fill your time. I think there's kind of this misperception that when you become a full-time writer that you'll have all this free time, but you always find ways to fill your time. And I've been a self-employed person for almost 20 years. And even if you have a day job and you don't have a day job, it's like prioritizing your time and what's most important to you is really important. And like Katie said, I'm a little bit of a planner. But like when it comes to my actual writing, I'm a little bit of a plantser. So I like to have an outline. I like to have kind of a bare bones, like tentpole type outline. And so I work off of that because I like to do a lot of discovery writing with my characters and such. But my week at a glance is basically Monday through Friday. I'm going to be writing for 4 days, and I'm going to be doing all my office work on one day because I don't enjoy office work. So I like to kind of just get it done in one day and get it over with. Now, if there's an email that comes through, for example, that I need to address, like from my agent or my editor, of course, I'll answer that email. But otherwise, I really try not to do any like heavy lifting on the business side of things, except for that one day of the week.
That's great. That's very insightful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Sunyi.
So I do live off my writing at the moment. I guess I would call myself a full-time writer. That feels like a weird title, but that comes with some huge caveats. The first caveat is that I was unemployed before I got picked up. So it's not that I quit my job to leap into writing, it's I was already in free fall. So this is like a parachute that slows the free fall. I'm still falling, but it's fine. And the second caveat is I live in a country with free healthcare, so I don't have to worry about insurance costs for me and the kids. I'm mentioning that because a lot of people talk about like, oh, when can you do full-time writing? And my answer is it really depends what country you live in, to be honest, and what kind of healthcare you have access to, because both my children have special needs. So that's a big thing for me. And yeah, I guess the third caveat is that the money in publishing world can be, it's like a gig economy. You know, every book is like a gig. You don't know when the next one will be. Every gig can make or break your career. And when you don't have backups, deadlines take on a whole new meaning. I'm probably about 4 months behind where I want to be for my sophomore book, and that does make me anxious because that's 4 months further away from the next paycheck. So I'm not sure I have a typical week. I'm a bit all over the place because I have my children half the week, and when they're with me, one of them has a lot of special needs, the other one is home educated, so they kind of eat a lot of time. I've always written just as much, I do as much as I can in my head, and then I write in short sprints. And I just try and manage what needs doing every individual week, because it's, you know, there's only one of me and there's a lot of different things I need to think about. I think something that really surprised me is, I mean, I was listening to Paulette talking about how she has one day, you know, for doing business emails, and I think maybe I should do that because answering emails becomes a part-time job. I think is so easy. I look at my phone, it's like there's all these little things that crop up that you need to respond to or that people want you to respond to, and it does really eat into the day. I would actually say, writing and editing is almost the least in a typical week. I have times where I'm drafting and I'm going all out and I'm not doing other things, and I have times where I'm editing and I'm going all out. But otherwise, it's a lot of business stuff or a lot of everything else, author brand, author website that you're thinking about, decisions and things you have to make. So there's a lot to it. I guess it's like putting on a show, but you've got to do the backstage as well as the performance. I guess is how I would compare it.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I love how we have different perspectives, but they're all going to be very insightful for our viewers. So that's great. So our next question is, what is the relationship like between you and your editor? Can I stay with you for that one, Sunyi?
I really like my editor. I know people have different relationships with their editors. I have some friends where, their editorial relationship is broken down, but I think that we have a lot of mutual respect. We think about craft in the same way. I find her really easy to talk to. Her questions are so good. She's very adaptable to her authors. So if you are the kind of author who needs to go into a cave for 4 months and write and not be bothered, she's fine with that. I like checking in more often. So when I began to really struggle with my sophomore book, she said, right, we'll meet like once a month, every month, just like for a short chat, just to check in and catch up and talk through ideas and kind of it just be a little bit of guidance, I guess. And in that way, yeah, she's been really good. Her edits are tough, but I think I always learn something from them. I hope so, because they're very and I was surprised by how much work she was willing to put into the book. I think you do sometimes hear that editors want books to be like near perfect. But we did 3 rounds of dev editing and like 11 months of overhauling on that book. It was a lot. So on the one hand, it's like I wish it'd been closer to what she wanted from the start, but on the other hand, I was glad that she's willing to put the work in and not override. So she was sending in the edit letter a list of things like, this is what doesn't work, this is what does work for me. And then the solution is up to me to sort out myself.
That's great. Awesome. Paulette, how about you?
I think my relationship with my editor is similar to Sunyi's. She's very, very communicative, and I've had a little bit of a shift in editors because whenever I first signed, I signed under Jody Warshaw, who is no longer with Lake Union, but she acquired my sophomore novel right before she left. And so she was actually able to do my developmental edits for the next novel, which was really great. And we just have a really great communication style. And that's carrying on with my new editor, Melissa Valentine, who is also wonderful. And the thing that I love about the editors that I've worked with is they're very understanding, they're compassionate. Lake Union is very much like they look at their authors as part of the family. And so, for example, whenever I got COVID unexpectedly this winter, my whole family had it. They gave me an extension without any kind of like pushback. They were like, absolutely, take whatever time you need, because I was in the middle of the first round of developmental edits for my second book. And I was really stressed out because there were a lot of big changes that I needed to implement. And I knew I would need a little bit more time. So I think just having that kind of relationship where you can go to your editor and you can ask, hey, this isn't working for me. And I can get on the phone either with Jody or with Melissa and talk things through. And they're very understanding and very open to discourse on how to make things better with the book, but also while respecting my artistic vision as a writer. And so I think with editorial, the main thing is just communication, just having that avenue open all the time to be able to communicate with your editor and to be honest about your limitations, because they're there as a support system. They're cheerleaders, that they believe in you or they wouldn't have signed you. And so it's really amazing to have that kind of support. And I think I've heard stories of people that haven't had very supportive editors, but I really feel like that's less of a thing, then it's the exception rather than the norm. Most writers I know have a great relationship with their editors.
It sounds like you do too. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you. And KD, same question.
Mostly the same answers. I absolutely adore my editor, Rini Sarah. She's my biggest cheerleader. She's the one who saw me and my potential and picked me up out of the pile and said, sure, I'm going to build a series around you. I spent so much time on my outlines. I mean, by the time I'm starting my 4th book now, and I've been working on the outline for 5 years. By the time I do my 9th book, I've been working on the outline for 10 years. It's so by the time she sees anything, it's been brainstormed, it's been outlined, it's been workshopped every page through a writing group, it's gone through beta reading. So it's usually pretty solid. So there's very little that I need to fix. I will say that I don't think many people realize that when you think editing, you think everything that happens before you have the printed book in your hand. There are different stages to it. The creative editing you do with your main editor is fantastic. I love that experience. It's a partnership. I can bounce ideas off Rini. Copy editing and like doing the grammar edits and the line edits, that's something different. At least with my publishing house, it's in the hands of a whole different department and a different group of people. That's been more challenging. I'm not going to lie, to the point where this novel, I took it differently and I did a lot of copy editing myself with a different group of people because mistakes had gone through into the books. And that is a reality depending on the size of the publishing house you work in and how fast you're going and what your timeline is. You could have 2 completely different experiences between the creative side of it and then the nitty gritty. Did you get the periods in the right place and the quotes in the right place and catch all the grammatical and consistency errors? So that was a learning experience for me, realizing where I needed to put my time personally and where it benefited the most.
That's very relatable, isn't it? Thank you so much. All right, so our next question is, what expectations did you have that you discovered you were wrong about once you actually were signed? Paulette, can I stay with you now?
Sure. So I was signed in September of 2020 with Lake Union and Jody, and I was really surprised at how quickly the process progressed. And so she signed my book, Parting the Veil, which came out in November of 2021. And so we had just a little over a year before the book published from the time I was signed, which usually it's 2 to 3, depending on your publisher. And so what KD was saying about his books, with Parting the Veil, I had worked on that book for a significant amount of time. It had been workshopped, it had been edited by a freelance editor. I had done extensive work on that book, so I didn't need very much in the way of developmental edits. So we did one really quick round of developmental edits with my editor, and then we went into production with everything else. And I think like the production calendar with my first book, now I know what to expect, but it was kind of a little bit like eye-opening to me, like how many people read your book, for one thing, and also just what the process is like as far as like the give and take. And you'll get your work done, you'll send it back to your editorial team, and then they'll send back, and like copy edits are completely different than developmental edits. And then you have proofreading and past pages and things like that the book has to go through. And I learned that at least with my publisher, if there are any major changes that I want to be in the arc, I need to have them done by copy edits, because after my publisher, they print the arcs after copy edits are completed. So it hasn't been proofed. So there might still be typos and things like that in the arcs. And so I didn't know really any of that whenever I had my debut, but now I kind of know. And so like going into my editorial process with my second book, I'm going to be very mindful when I start copy edits to make sure that everything is the way I want it to be when reviewers get that arc in their hands. So that's kind of one of the things that my expectations, or I was kind of surprised by, or I didn't really understand the process. I think your first book is definitely a learning experience all the way around. And it was really good. And I was impressed by like how organized Lake Union was with the process. When they told me things that would arrive on a certain date, they would arrive on that date. And so I had my editorial calendar on my schedule to where I could pretty much predict when I would really need to buckle down and have a hard deadline, and whenever I would have a little bit more freedom on my schedule. So that was really, really helpful to me.
That's great.
Yeah.
Katie, coming to you, same question.
Much of the same stuff. I think the only other thing that I would really add there is when you first start out, I mean, everyone's experience is going to be different based on how you are as a writer and your publishing house. There's like everything we say might apply to you and it might not, but it's good to hear all these caveats of things to pay attention to. I will say this in the beginning, trust your agent and your editor. They've got experience and there's a good chance they're right. Every time I thought I was right, I was wrong. So I had a lot to learn about the industry in the beginning, and it pays to be humble and listen closely. But you are going to come to a point where about a year or two into it, where you've got to start listening to your gut, because while you do depend on the input you're getting from your agent and your editor and your publisher, you've learned yourself, and no one spends as much time on your writing as you do. You are the writer. This is your world. This is your brand. And there does come a point where slowly but surely you start making, your feelings and your direction that you want to set known. And it's a pretty exciting stage, but in the beginning, absolutely pay attention to what people are saying around you. You don't know better. Things that you think might be, for instance, on my second book, I had to cut 100 pages. It killed me with the way I outline. Cutting 100 pages right when I'm about to start writing is, I mean, I don't even know how to describe what it did to my outline to recover from that. It was because of what was going on, shipping shortages, paper shortages. That's a huge issue right now in publishing, a really material issue, getting books printed and available for publication date. So my editor wanting to keep my page length to the same length of my previous books made a lot of sense in that context. So you might immediately start thinking, I can't believe I need to cut all this. But when you start asking questions and pay attention to the answers, it does make sense. And then you can think ahead and how that's going to impact what you do with your next novel.
That's great advice. Thank you very much. Sunyi, same question.
I think just in terms of, I guess, expectations, I was surprised by how unpredictable publishing is. Every person I've met has a different story for how they got into publishing, to the point where I think probably almost every book is an outlier, which is a bit of a weird thought. Nothing worked the way I thought it did, from marketing to editing. I didn't realize how tiered publishing was. I think you kind of think of books as all having the same chance on the starting line in terms of sales, and that's not the case. Some books get shoes and get to start a few hundred meters ahead of the others, and some books are kind of dragging an anchor behind them in terms of support. And that just that publishing was so varied. It has, and no one will tell you anything. I think that was the other thing. Everyone assumes that you know what you're doing and that you know what all the terms mean and that you know what's going to happen. And people don't think to explain. So I didn't realize how much I would have to research myself and ask and shore myself up with knowledge, and kind of, you need to know what all the terms in your contract means and whether it's a good idea to do this thing or that thing, or sign play this right and that right. And you can't, your agent's there to help, but it's the more you know yourself, the better.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. So maybe the opposite of that question is, and some of you, I think, already briefly kind of touched on this, but were there any expectations you had that were definitely correct or maybe even exceeded? Paulette, can we start with you?
Sure. I was really impressed, and I had heard this from some of my colleagues who are published with the same publisher before I signed with them, that they really bring the author in, and the author is very involved on creative input. And so I had a lot of input on my cover. I had a lot of input on my cover copy. I didn't have a lot of input on things like what marketing was going to do, because at my publisher, marketing is pretty much completely different from editorial. So there was a lot of that going on. And there was, like, my editor definitely lobbied for a lot more marketing for me, but they will only sign off on so much. And a lot of it really depends on placement in the market and where they want to put you. And so I was kind of a high mid-list title, I would say. And so I didn't get as much marketing as maybe some people did, but I did get some. Like I got Amazon first reads in the UK and Australia. And so that was great because I got some early reviews that way. But there are different aspects and different tiers, like Sunyi was saying, of how like a book is approached and how a book is marketed. But I was really pleased on the whole about how I was pulled in, and my opinions mattered, and my artistic vision, my creative vision mattered for the end product. And I really enjoyed that process. I got to contribute to the creative brief, and it was really great. And I ended up with the cover of my dreams, and I love my cover even still. Amanda Hudson designed it, and I was really pleased and pleasantly surprised because I've heard different things from my friends who are with different publishers when it came to their cover and their title. I did have to change my title. Marketing didn't like the original title, so I had a lot of input on that, though. I gave them lots of different possibilities, and they kind of chose the one that they thought would bring the best market placement. And so it just really depends on like your publisher. Everything is so subjective with that. And so I think it is a good overview to get lots of different people's opinions on that, because I think every publisher is different. So
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sunyi, how about for you?
So I knew that publishing has a reputation for not kind of marketing or supporting authors. I had an awareness that publishing could do it well when it chose to. And I think actually seeing the back end of the process, it did surprise me because, you know, obviously there are tiers in publishing, and I've got friends that are kind of all over the spectrum from small press to you know, doing really well. But even if say you're mid-list in my genre, my age category, you can still expect to sell like 5,000 to 8,000 copies a year. That's actually like when I first started out looking at writing, I looked into self-publishing. That was actually my first choice. And for a self-published book, you know, getting a couple thousand copies sold is a big deal. And then for publishing to be like, yeah, you know, mid-tier is like kind of 5 to 8K copies, it just blew my mind a bit. And that when publishing wants to get things done, it really puts pressure and it puts weight behind some books when it chooses to. And just that it does work. It feels like it shouldn't work. In some ways, it's very archaic as an industry, but it really can pull its weight together and get books out there and get them in front of readers and get the hype going. And that's really cool to see when, you know, you see a book take off. And for friends and either books that you love or friends' books you've written or hopefully your own, it's a really cool process.
Thank you very much. Katie, how about for you?
Yeah, that was a fantastic answer. I thought, I mean, really, I have seen when publishers really want to go all out, they can do it, but not necessarily as many people get those chances nowadays. I was definitely with the smaller publishing house. I've got a marketing contact and a publicity contact, but there are extreme limitations on what they're able to do for you. For me, I reached out to my readers. That was the way that I grew my series. I connected with them. I've read every review I've seen on Amazon and Goodreads. Not many authors want to necessarily do that. I've been pretty fortunate that they're mostly kind and supportive and encouraging and actually give me great ideas for where I might want to retool my series. But that relationship I formed with my readers grew my series grassroots. Absolutely. Everything, I mean, my sales have really kept on going up steadily. And that's all because of my readers, because they read something, they like it, they engage with other people who like it, they spread the word, they get their friends to read it. I will always respect that element of social media and that part of the publicity process, because again, you do have to figure out what can your publisher do for you and what can't they do for you, and what they can't do for you, or what they can't do for you, how do you fill in the gap yourself? So I thought that when you talked about covers, for instance, that was I was, the one thing I was terrified about my book was the cover. What was the cover going to look like? And it turned out my publisher was actually very receptive to me doing the work. If I was willing to connect with the illustrator and pull out ideas from the novel, examples of physical description, my own thoughts of metaphors and imagery that might work, they liked that. I did the work for them and I shared that with the illustrator. And it was a complete partnership with the person who did the cover. My Epstein is fantastic. So ask where you can get involved. Maybe you're not getting the resources you need from your publisher, but maybe there's something you can do to put yourself in that one particular area and enhance it. So asking a lot of questions, getting a lot of information is the best.
Thank you very much. I love it. So our next question is, to what extent is your publisher involved in the creative process? I think we touched a little bit about this too, but can I start with you, Sunyi?
My publisher, not really. My editor, a lot. I think at least with my publisher, I think for my friends, that's their experience as well, is you kind of exist in this bubble with like your editor and your agent, and you don't necessarily interact a lot with the rest of the team. I mean, you have some contact, but and I think that's partly by design. It helps them to break basically the book down into like little work groups with clients and editors. So my editor, I talk to her a lot about craft and concept in the next books and plots and stuff like that. If the publisher has an opinion, like the rest of kind of Tor, generally, I don't know. I've never heard from them. But I think that may vary, depending on what kind of author you are and what you're writing. If you're in a series, it's going to be a completely different conversation. I'm kind of contracted to write standalone, so it's very different. If your publisher is like smaller and everyone's more like involved, so I guess like Angry Robot is a good example. A friend of mine is with Angry Robot, and they know kind of like the whole team, so everyone's has more input. Then that's a different experience as well. But I interact a lot with my editor and not so much with the rest for anything creative.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. Katie, same question.
Yeah, my editor, Rini, one of the first things she said to me was, if I really love a book, I am not going to mess with it too much. She said, there's a reason I love it. I'm not going to try to retinker it. So she and I have a very proactive relationship. When I'm really concerned about a direction I'm taking, I'll talk with her in advance. But for the most part, she really respects, I think, my creative content. You don't always control the name of your book. That's something you need to let go of. That's a definite thing. You can make a recommendation, but at the end of the day, the publisher is going to choose that bit of creativity. But for the most part, I think that the thing I'm going to say here is that you're talking with right now published authors who are very close to we're not at the beginning of our race. We're in the middle of it or towards the end of it. For new writers, be really careful about this, because in the beginning, while it's great to stand up for your editorial vision and your creative vision, when you're starting off as a writer, you've got to be really receptive to feedback. You really have to examine your relationship with criticism. The one thing I see the most from writers who are getting dispirited with the process or angry or disappointed, it's because they're not accommodating feedback well. They're not absorbing it. They're not listening to it. They're not reacting to it. And that can really derail your career in the beginning. There does get to a point, the closer you get towards having a book on a shelf, where you can put your foot down a little bit more and assert control. But in the beginning, you really do want to listen to those points of view around you.
Thank you. Very valuable. And jumping to Paulette, how about for you?
Yeah, I would totally agree with Katie on that. Like with my debut, it was a lot of learning, like to listen to people who knew more than I did. And just in general, learning to craft and learning different things and getting feedback and critique. It's really important to like put your emotions on the back burner. Like your first knee-jerk reaction is probably not going to be the correct one whenever it comes to implementing feedback. So it's good to sit on it and rest for a minute, let the ego simmer down a bit, because honestly, like, especially in the market we're in right now, like listening to what people in marketing, listening to what people in editorial say is really, really important. And I'm really lucky that my editors really have that eagerness to work with the creative side, and it's a collaboration. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed about the whole process, like with my second book, I've gotten a little bit braver, and I think you get a little bit braver with each book with asking for different things. And so I just kind of like sent a little email to my editor last week. And I said, hey, what would be the possibility of me getting some interior art for this book? And she was like, let me run it by the art team, see what everyone says, and see if what we can do. And she came back and they approved something. I'm not sure what the scope of it will be just yet. It has to kind of go through that art meeting. But I think knowing that your editor is there to be your support system and to help you realize your artistic vision is really important part of the process. And they're on your side. They're there to help you. And so asking for certain things like that, like not asking for the world right away. And but as you prove yourself, as you go along, as your sales come up and such, and as you grow your readership, because your fans will also have a bearing on what your publisher decides to do. It's really like our publishers look at reviews, our publishers look at how we interact with our readers. And so once you build up that readership, it really opens more doors for you. And so I think with each subsequent book, you have a little bit more flexibility in your creative vision, and your editor is there to help support you in that.
Makes sense. Thank you. That's great. All right, so for our next question, I feel like we've briefly touched on this throughout some of the previous questions, but I'd really like to drill down a little bit more. To what extent is your publisher involved in the marketing process? Can we drill down to that one? Let's start with Katie.
I think that's the area that I'm still figuring out the most. Again, I'm with a relatively smaller publishing house. Marketing resources are not extensive. I have a dedicated contact. They're great about addressing issues with how things load on Amazon or Goodreads I do myself. But the buy links are all everything I need to know to actually put on my website, for instance, to direct people to buy a copy if they want to buy a copy. I do find, though, that marketing is the area that you probably get to invest a lot of yourself in, more than anything, especially if you're a smaller writer. You've got to put in the time. And I think the best advice I can give here, and I kind of said this earlier, find something you love doing. There are so many different types of marketing outreach. Go to a conference, throw yourself on the floor, walk around and hand your book out to people. I can't do that. I can't. I curl up in a corner and die. I'm an introvert. I'm a hermit. I can't do that. I can do panels. I love talking with readers. I love talking. Right now I'm talking with two authors who are amazing, and I'm writing down some of the stuff they're saying. So I love doing this. So this is where I invest my time. I invest my time with my readers. I adore my readers. They're just the most amazing group of people. They send me artwork. They send me playlists. I've got interpretive dances of my story. I've got Mongolian poems. They've done the most amazing things for me, and I try to give back to them. I do a lot of free content. That's my marketing. I love writing. I love sharing news stories in my world. Why not put that out there for readers? It does grow my reader base. I know it does. I can see the rise in sales whenever I'm doing a serial installment of a free novella. But these are things I like doing, and I can put my energy behind it. It doesn't necessarily feel like work. But I will say marketing is the one area that I really did have to invest myself in. That's the one area that I wish I was with a really large publishing house that had unlimited budgets to put me out there. But that's just not a reality for most people. So you do have to put yourself out on the line as well.
That's fair. Thank you so much. Sunyi, same for you. Can we talk a little bit about the marketing process?
I guess firstly I want to kind of build on what Katie says, and that you need to know as an author what your own strengths and weaknesses are and work with them, really, because a lot of the marketing stuff I struggle with. I lack the social energy and skills to navigate a lot of the things that someone more extroverted would be fine with. Part of that's being autistic, and part of that's just being me. For the marketing, I think I'm going to be really nitpicky and say it's maybe less about the publisher and more about the editor and book. I know, so I guess technically I've got two publishers. I know that Tor is very tiered. Specifically, I have friends who are also debuting with Tor, and their experiences are all over the map. Some of them have been treated very badly and basically given no marketing. Things like, their books don't get sent to booksellers, really basic things. They're just not sent for reviews and stuff like that. And the other end, you've got probably like Christopher Paolini and people like that. You get like the red carpet rolled out. My experience with marketing has been good. That's down to my editor. My editor loves the book, so she threw her weight behind it and she pushed her team to support it. And they do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. A lot of publishing marketing is invisible, I think, to the average consumer, which maybe lends to this rumor that the publishers don't do anything. But I think something is forgotten is publishers can't reach readers directly. That's not what they do. Their whole model is built on selling books to booksellers and then hoping the booksellers sell to readers, which is why, you know, authors reaching out to readers like Katie does is really important, because they're not doing that. And it does work for them. It does, you know, they sell to brick and mortars, or in the UK, the market here for fantasy is all based around crates, book crates, and hitting Sunday list and stuff like that. So that's their side of things. And I think they do it well. They vary how much they communicate with you. I found, you know, the UK side, they tend to kind of do things and then return and just be like, here's a list of things we've done. Is that okay? And the American side, they were a bit more involved with like, here's what we're planning to do and talking you through it. But I don't have complaints about marketing. I'm glad that they can help me because I'm ineffectual at it myself.
Thank you. Paulette, to you also for your marketing process.
Yeah, my editor, she was really instrumental in getting me the marketing that I got. And it, like Sunyi was saying, I think there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that we never see. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors when it comes to marketing and publishing, and things that I can't even begin to understand about how they figure out algorithms and where to put the book, like placement and who to distribute it to. And so I think that trust is a huge part of that. Trust in your publisher, trust in your editor, trust in your team to get you the kind of marketing that your book deserves and that will increase your sales. And so I have an author relations manager that I talk to who helps me kind of answer all my questions on the marketing end of things after the book goes to print. And she's wonderful. And she puts up with my long emails with all these questions. But I ask her things like, for example, how many words am I allowed to share, like in an excerpt, without being in breach of contract? Just different things like that, to where I know what my parameters are whenever it comes to my self-marketing. Because I learned a lot my debut year, and I learned my limits. And I was kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I kind of wore myself out with that. And you never really know what your ROI is, except for when you get reader response, like Katie was talking about. And so I figured out the things that I really enjoy doing, and that's panels. I enjoy being a guest on podcasts. I enjoy having Instagram lives with my friends. So those are the things where I'm going to focus most of my energy. I do not enjoy doing my newsletter. I enjoy interviewing other authors for my blog. I'm really about like helping other authors like increase their visibility and like helping my friends, like elevating my friends. And so I will often invite other authors to be interviewees on my blog. And so that's kind of how I do that. And then that kind of organically brings more people to my website, and they usually stick around. I can kind of tell from my analytics where they hop around on my website, and maybe some of them might read my book as well. And so I really feel like building a community, whether that's with your readers or fellow authors, is a huge part of your success as an author. I think if you want to do social media and you want to be consistent about it, that's great. But I also think there's something to be said for only doing the things that you really enjoy, because I think people can tell when you really enjoy something. And I think it has a little bit more resonance than if you're just trying to do everything.
That makes a lot of sense. I was going to make a joke, who really does love to do the newsletter, but there's probably somebody that's going to raise their hand, so I won't make that joke. Well, you all have truly given us a masterclass in what it is like to walk in your shoes. And I think that there are quite a few members of our WriteHive community that would love to follow in your footsteps. So thank you all so much for all of the insights and advice that you've given us. I'd like to wrap up our panel with one final question and go around the room and see, are there any resources that you would share with our authors in the WriteHive community that can maybe help them get a better grasp of this topic or some of the topics that we've talked about today? If any of you have anything that you'd like to share, maybe I'll start with you, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've already talked about a lot of the resources I use. My agent, my editor, publishing house is there. The things that I would say are take advantage of things like this. I mean, WriterHive, this is amazing. I mean, you just got a master class. That was a great term. I mean, some of the stuff you heard is incredibly rich and varied feedback of the inner workings of publishing. And I'm thinking about a lot of the panels I've been on, and we hit a lot of issues. You did a really good job with your questions. There's a lot of good source material here for people to absorb and learn. And even better, every situation is going to be different, but now you know what questions to ask. And putting yourself in a position to be educated enough to ask the right questions, to know what categories to focus on when you're even deciding to sign a relationship with the publisher is really important. The only other thing I would say beyond that is if you're really getting serious about going out there and you are not in a writing group, if you're not getting consistent feedback on your writing right now before you hit that stage, you're missing step number one in this process. As far as I'm concerned, to explore becoming a published writer without examining your relationship to feedback and getting that feedback and becoming better about giving it in situations, it's going to be really hard to set out on this road. But so thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here. Sunyi, do you have any resources that you might like to share?
I should start taking a commission because I recommend this book so much, but there's a book called Before and After the Book Deal by Courtney Mom, and it's like my industry Bible. It covers kind of from when you're querying all the way through every step, through like agenting, going on submission, what happens if you die in submission, getting a book deal, the different types of book deals. She breaks down money, advance sizes, what you can expect, kind of rough brackets. She teaches you how to read your Amazon ratings, all this stuff that's just really, really good info, and how to survive your first year as a published author, if you get that far, hopefully you will. And it's very funny as well. It's very funny and down to earth. And if you're not in a position to buy or borrow that book, because I think it does cost a fair bit on Amazon, there's a free online podcast called Track Changes, First Draft with Sarah Inney. And that has a lot of the same material condensed, and it's a 9-episode podcast. It has transcripts if, like me, you don't process audio well. And it will again cover a breakdown of a lot of things, and some of what's there is very depressing to read. I think some of the realities of publishing, but it's all good info. And other than that, just because I was always writing when I was dead broke and didn't have many resources, use your fellow writers. They're your best resource. Your communities, they're out there: Discord, Twitter, Absolute Right forums, Facebook groups, although those are a bit dodgy. But they are there, and make use of the knowledge and share support, share critique, whatever you can.
Thank you so much. Paulette, any resources that you would like to share with us?
I love podcasts. There are a ton of podcasts that are writer focused out there that really delve deep into the business side of things and also the creative side of things as well. And the WriteHive podcast is excellent. I've been a guest on that podcast before as well. And they really talk a lot about craft on that podcast. And I think that's a good place to start, especially if you're a newer writer, is craft and like getting feedback and things like that. And Right Now by Sarah Warner is one of my all-time favorite podcasts. I just love Sarah's delivery, and she's very calm and soothing to listen to. And she has a lot of guests who have a lot of experience in the writing community and in the business side of writing. And so I enjoy her podcast. And I think just getting involved in a community, like Katie was saying, like having a writers group, a place that is safe for you to talk about your ideas, to share your work, and to get feedback. It's really important, because I really think that together we elevate one another and we learn how to take and give feedback, which is an important part of growing as an author. And those would be my biggest bits of advice. There's just lots of great resources out there. It just takes a little bit of looking and you'll find what you need. And this conference is one of the greatest places to start.
Yay, I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that does it for this panel. I hope that everyone enjoyed tuning in today with us. Thank you so much for watching. Before we wrap up, I would love to thank our panelists for their time walking us through a week in their life as a trade pub author. Our group, we will definitely stay in the chat a little bit longer to continue answering questions from our WriteHive 2022 attendees. But to just wrap up briefly, I will go around the room and I'd like to know from each of our panelists, please let our viewers know what projects you would like to plug and how we can find you after the conference. So let's start with Paulette. I'll stay with you.
Hi, so you can find me at P. Kennedy Writes pretty much everywhere on the internet when it comes to social media, so Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And my website is paulettekennedy.com, and I put a lot of interviews up with authors on there and a lot of content. My book that's out right now and available to purchase is Parting the Veil, and you can find it on Amazon or request it from your favorite bookseller. And it's also in a lot of libraries, so that's a good option too. So my next book won't be out until December, and I don't think pre-orders will probably be live until later this summer. So it's not available yet, but it's coming.
Great, we'll keep an eye out for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sunyi, are there any projects that you would like to plug, and how can we find you after the conference?
For finding me, fortunately my name, which was my bane as a teenager, is now very easy to search for. There's not many Sunyi Deans. My website is just sunyidean.com, and I'm kind of mostly on Twitter and a bit on Facebook. I think I have an Instagram account that I look at sometimes, and TikTok, which I try not to think about. And other than that, I have the Book Eaters, which by the time this panel airs will be coming out in a month and a half about. And it's available from the kind of usual places. Here, I would say your indie bookstores, but wherever you can find it, or library if it's free.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And KD, what would you like to plug, and how can we find you after the conference?
My series is called The Tarot Sequence. The third book comes out on May 17th, The Hourglass Throne. I'm mostly on Twitter at KD Edwards _NC for North Carolina. And I will be announcing a lot of, I think is pretty exciting news over the next couple of weeks, but I can't say anything yet. But I do have a lot planned for as I've ended one trilogy of what I hope is going to be a 3-trilogy series, and I am eagerly embarking on the next trilogy, and I have a lot of news to share with my readers in the near future. Awesome.
Can't wait to see what that exciting news will be. Well, that's it for our panel today. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. Again, we'll be in the chat answering questions. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you in the WriteHive Discord. Thank you so much.